And so, a remarkable tradition was formed with wisdom from a variety of cultures and the learning that had taken place over many centuries. It would seem that the world of medicine and spiritual diagnosis would grow together and continue to evolve, but this was not to be. A time the West looks back upon as a bright beginning also brought an end to an ancient tradition.
1492. Even if you hate history, it's the date that all of us remember. It's a date really that's pivotal. The history of the world tilts on that year because the earth is no longer flat. The globe is the globe. We become the world. And old world and new worlds come together, and we continue to live in the shadow of that discovery. But there's a dark side to that date as well, certainly for our Native American peoples in North America, but also for the ending of the Ars Moriendi. The sacred art of living and dying comes to an end in 1492. And it's sort of hard for us to imagine today what the connecting of the dots is between the event of Columbus and the medieval monastic infirmaries. But they are, in fact, very much connected. Columbus, of course, was Italian, but he was bankrolled by the Spanish King and Queen of Spain, Isabel and Ferdinand. And when they learned of Columbus's discovery, his planting of the flag of Spain in the New World, claiming all of the rest of the planet for the Kingdom of Spain, and putting it under also the cross of Christianity, which were the two symbols of that time, Isabel and Ferdinand threw a party, a celebration of triumph. And a sad part of that celebration was the foundation of the Spanish Inquisition, an effort to purge certainly the Iberian Peninsula, but eventually all of Europe from any influence that was not white, not Caucasian, not European, not Christian. The suffering was immense. The slaughter of Sephardic Jews in Iberia, the slaughter of Muslims, it began in 1492 and continued for some time. But what ended was not only the interfaith and intercultural collaboration. What ended out of paranoia was this marvelous tradition that had been developed for hundreds of years, that had picked up wonderful lessons from the whole global community in the early Middle Ages. And so sadly, the triumph of the Ars Moriendi comes to an end. What it's replaced with is eventually, in the north of Europe, increasingly the scientific method, the dualistic way of looking at human nature. We went back to the Greco-Roman tradition, and we trusted that. And it's brought us some marvelous kind of gifts. I wouldn't want to go back to a world without CAT scans and MRIs and antibiotics. But on the other hand, what was lost was looking at the human person as a total person. And some of those traditions that came from the Celtic lands and developed in those infirmaries were suddenly not to be practiced, because frankly, if there was any allusion to anything that was Jewish or Muslim or non-European, it was to be expunged. The books were to be burned. So 1492 becomes a watershed, and a sad watershed in some ways in terms of the Ars Moriendi. So it's a long time between 1492 and 1967. Cicely Saunders' work at St. Christopher's Hospice in London, the effort to bring back a model that had been lost for almost 500 years. But I think that happened not only in hospice, it began to happen in other ways during that period of time as well. There was a sense that maybe we were beginning to reach the end of what technology could bring us. Technology will continue to be, of course, a source of tremendous discovery and understanding the physical illness and suffering of the person. But we also know that that technology can't bring us the art of understanding the role of the human spirit in suffering and in healing. And Cicely Saunders began her experiment. It worked, and it just exploded overnight. It was exported all over the world through initially the hospice movement, and now I think it's beginning to influence healthcare and other aspects of life as well. If I was to sum up what our discovery from those medieval texts led us to, and we're still translating some of them, I would say the bottom line is that you have to first diagnose someone's spiritual and emotional suffering before you attempt to respond to it. As someone who is trained as a chaplain, as someone who is ordained a priest, I was never given that information in my training. I was pretty much told the one-size-fits-all model. See suffering, go to the manual or go to the book, and give the right prescription, the right ritual to address it. The Ars Moriendi is, I think, part of our great global heritage. I think what our ancestors knew, and we forgot, and now we're coming to discover again, is that just like in physical suffering, you would never address the illness until you knew what the source of it was. The same thing is true in terms of the human spirit. We have to know what the origin of that suffering is first. And in that wound, the wound that becomes a kind of luminous wound, they called it in the Middle Ages. It's not a place of terror. It's not a place of death. It's a place ultimately of incredible life.